The man at the edge of the village lane carried nothing that marked him as a threat. His clothes were plain. His gait was unhurried. Night had already swallowed the fields outside, and only a few yellow windows still glowed against the dark. As he passed a low farmhouse, he slowed, listening. No barking dog, no conversation, just the creak of a door shifting in its frame. He studied the house, taking in details without writing anything down. One story, simple brick, a narrow courtyard wall a man could step over. Light leaking from one window, then darkness as someone inside blew out a lamp. By the time the last glow faded, he knew how many steps from the road to the door and how far it was to the nearest neighbor. This was how Yang Xinhai hunted. He chose rural homes because they were small, isolated, and used to strangers passing through. He had moved across provinces for years, working odd jobs on construction sites or farms, drifting through Henan, Anhui, Shandong, and Hebei. He kept no fixed address and no pattern that village police could easily track. When work dried up, he walked back roads until he saw a house that looked vulnerable. He climbed the low wall and eased into the courtyard. The night air smelled of dust and old cooking smoke. Hidden under his shirt was a small hammer wrapped in cloth. He held it now as he pressed his ear to the door and listened for snoring inside. Most of his victims never knew a stranger had entered their home. He carried out his attacks while families slept in the same room or in adjoining rooms, separated only by thin walls. Once inside, he moved quietly, searching for the adult most likely to wake. He struck first at heads and faces with the hammer or an iron bar, aiming to end any chance of resistance in a single blow. By the early 2000s, police in several Chinese provinces were dealing with scenes that looked hauntingly similar. Entire households had been wiped out in the night. The weapon changed from location to location. A hammer in one house, an axe borrowed from a yard in another, a shovel or iron bar taken from a shed, but the pattern repeated. Blunt force to the head, little sign of forced entry, and no obvious connection between the victims. Investigators began by looking locally. In rural areas, violence inside families, disputes over land, and robberies by neighbors were more common explanations than a roaming stranger. But, as reports accumulated, officers noticed that some attacks had nearly identical details even though they happened in different counties and different provinces. Families of 4 or 5 were killed in their own beds. Household valuables were taken, but the theft never fully explained the level of violence. Yang had not started with murder. Born in 1968 in Henan province, he grew up in a poor farming family and left school early. In his 20s, he committed burglaries and other crimes and spent time in labor camps and prisons. When he was released, he returned to the same kind of flexible life that made him hard to trace. Short-term construction work, migrant labor, and nights in cheap lodging or abandoned buildings. His first known killings took place in the late 1990s. Investigators later concluded that on at least one night he slipped into a home, attacked a couple as they slept, and left without leaving much behind except blood and confusion. Local police treated cases like this as isolated tragedies. Without a suspect and without a system showing events in other regions, they had little to connect the dots. In November 1999, a family in Henan province was attacked in their home. Yang entered at night with a blunt weapon. By morning, 4 people were dead. In 2000 and 2001, similar crimes appeared in other areas. In small farming communities where people rarely locked their doors, rumors spread faster than official statements. Stories circulated about a stranger who killed whole households without warning. Parents kept children inside after dark. Still, authorities had no name to put to the fear. The investigation shifted as more scenes linked together. Provincial public security bureaus began sharing details. They found repeated use of simple tools as weapons, often taken from the victim's own courtyards, and the same ruthless efficiency. The killer showed no hesitation in attacking women, men, or children. Yang traveled light, avoided trains and buses when he could, and chose his targets while walking, not while watching them over time. He attacked when he believed every adult in the home could be caught asleep. He stole cash, jewelry, or small items he could carry, then slipped back into the flow of migrant laborers crossing the countryside. The case broke open through routine police work. On November 3, 2003, in Kangzhou, Hebei Province, officers stopped a man who was behaving suspiciously near a dance hall. When they checked his identification and ran his fingerprints, records showed prior convictions. Further questioning raised more red flags. He gave evasive answers about where he had been living and what work he did. Investigators decided to hold him for deeper questioning. The man they had pulled aside was Yang Xinhai. At first, he denied involvement in anything more serious than theft. Over hours of interrogation, confronted with evidence that placed him near multiple crime scenes, his account began to break. Chinese police later reported that once he started talking, he went far beyond what they had already suspected. He confessed to killing dozens of people over several years, describing attacks on entire families in villages and farmhouses across 4 provinces. According to official counts released later, Yang admitted to murdering 67 people and assaulting many others. He gave investigators details about individual cases, the layout of houses, the tools he used, and the sequence of his attacks. Teams were sent to corroborate his statements. They matched his descriptions with unsolved files, households wiped out, doors left intact, weapons found abandoned in yards or fields. Psychiatrists evaluated him during the investigation. Reports stated that he understood his actions and was responsible for them. He was described as harboring deep resentment and showing little remorse. When asked why he had killed so many, he reportedly said that society had treated him badly and that he did not care about other people's lives. News of his arrest spread inside China once authorities confirmed that the man in custody matched the pattern of the roaming killer. For families in Henan, Anhui, Shandong, and Hebei who had lost relatives in unexplained night attacks, his capture provided a name and a face for the horror that had entered their homes. Yang's trial took place in February 2004 in the Intermediate People's Court of Luohe in Henan Province. The charges listed dozens of counts of murder, as well as robbery and assault. Court records, later summarized in state media, described how he selected homes, entered at night, and used hammers, axes, or other blunt instruments to kill sleeping families. Survivors and relatives of victims attended, listening as prosecutors read out dates and locations that traced his path across the countryside. The proceedings moved quickly. Yang did not contest most of the accusations. The court found him guilty on all major counts and sentenced him to death. On February 14, 2004, just months after his capture, Yang Xinhai was executed by shooting, according to official announcements. In the rural areas where he had walked unrecognized, the notice of his execution did not erase what he had done. It left behind houses that stood empty and villages that locked their doors at night in a way they had not done before. For them, the story of Yang Xinhai was about ordinary homes and the danger carried by a quiet man on a dark road. Thank you for listening to Homicide Files. Subscribe for more true crime stories.